To select a bride for the heir, the Grand Princess organized a polo match specifically for the daughters of noble families. During the match, the heir momentarily lost control of his horse, which trampled my leg, leaving me unable to walk properly for the rest of my life. To compensate me, the Grand Princess granted me the privilege of becoming the heir's consort. Everyone in the capital envied me, and after marriage, we lived in harmony and supported each other for 30 years. On the day I passed away, the heir held my hand with a look of remorse. I never meant to hurt you back then, and this marriage was never my wish. If you hadn't intervened and gotten in the way, I wouldn't have lost my true love and carried this regret to this day. If there is a next life, may we each find peace and never meet again. Just as he wished. When I opened my eyes again, I saw the wild horse charging straight toward me and pushed my stepsister, who was beside me, out of the way. Stepsister screamed, watching helplessly as the raised horse's hoof was about to trample her. At the critical moment, Xie Chaowen tightly gripped the reins. The horse's head was pulled to one side, finally stopped just a foot away from my stepsister. What a pity! The entire room fell silent. Everyone's gaze was fixed on my stepsister, whispering, "Can't even imagine how painful it would be if I stepped on it. What's pain compared to gaining the prince's attention and securing this marriage? Even if it hurts, it's worth it." Xie Jiawen dismounted from his horse. He stood before Xiao Yiqing. The voice was gentle and mellow. "Miss Xiao, are you well?" For a moment, all the noble ladies looked at her with envy. Xie Chaowen was the eldest son of the princess, the designated heir of the marquis's household. At 6, he could compose poetry with ease. By 10, his literary talent was as vast as the ocean. At 20, he founded the Hidden Edge Academy, providing shelter and education for underprivileged scholars across the land. The Crown Prince's tutor once said that if the world's literary talent were measured in 10 do, Xie Chaowen alone would claim 9. He was the most unparalleled gentleman in the capital, a peerless figure among men, the secret crush hidden in the hearts of countless noblewomen. At this moment, he shed his usual brocade robe and changed into a set of black martial attire. The scholarly aura and martial spirit clashed, creating an exceptionally graceful demeanor. Who among those present could remain unmoved? My younger sister had forgotten that overwhelming fear of death. She tightened her handkerchief, her face flushed with embarrassment. She stammered, I'm fine." This scene was so familiar in my previous life. That wild horse charged straight at me and Xie Chaowen did not pull on the reins. The out-of-control horse threw me to the ground amidst the gasps of the crowd. It stomped down and broke my calf. A piercing pain shot through my lower body. I lay paralyzed on the bed like mud, unable to get up for 3 months. The imperial physician said these legs would never stand again. The princess of the Long House brought Xie Chaowen to confess to me, in front of my parents, decided to choose me as the crown prince's bride. I had just swallowed the bitter medicinal soup, and through the layers of curtains, I looked at Xie Jiawen's face, saying I don't fancy him. Well, that seems to be false. In the silence of the room, Xie Jiawen bowed his head and paid his respects. Lifting my gaze again, I met his eyes head-on. My heart skipped a beat. To marry Xiao Lingyun is my great fortune. It is his fortune, my misfortune. The Grand Princess hurried over and, seeing the scene before her, pressed a hand to her chest. She let out a long sigh of relief. Then she pulled her stepsister over and looked her up and down. "It seems fate has brought us together. What's your name? Which family are you from? Do you have someone in your heart?" My stepsister quickly glanced at Xie Chaowen, her voice as faint as a mosquito's hum. "I, Xiao Yiqing, am the daughter of the Minister of Rights, and I have never had a sweetheart." The princess nodded and looked at Xie Chaowen. "In that case, what are your thoughts?" When I lowered my eyes, quietly watching my stepsister's eyes light up. In my past life, I only found out after marriage that Xie Chaowen had a lover at Songfeng Academy. Only that woman came from an ordinary background and had disguised herself as a man. No matter what, she could never win the approval of the Princess of the Long. The marriage is beyond redemption. This polo match is merely a pretense to appease the princess. Aside from that person, it doesn't matter whom I marry. Upon hearing this, Xie Chaowen raised his eyes and scanned the crowd. The noble ladies all raised their heads, only I lowered my head and shrank back slightly. Xie Chaowen's gaze paused for a moment before he spoke, neither sorrowful nor joyful. If mother approves, The next moment, the wild horse, which had just been calmed by someone, seemed to be suddenly startled. It broke free from its reins and charged wildly. People scattered in all directions, fleeing in panic. No matter where I ran, that horse stayed close behind me. Its neighing was hoarse, just like that sticky, nauseating nightmare from my previous life. I could run no more, my chest heaving violently. He drew the guard's long sword and held it horizontally in front of him. His hand gripping the sword was shaking, but his gaze was resolute. The instant the horse's hooves lifted, about to trample me to pieces, I closed my eyes and raised the sword high. The bitter wind howled past my ears. The blood-red steed personally bestowed by His Majesty crashed to the ground. Dust and dirt billowed up everywhere. Not far away, Xie Chaowen lowered the bow and arrow in his hand. The black robes fluttered, eyes deep and mysterious too. The polo event ended hastily amidst the chaos. The duck that was almost in hand flew away after being cooked without getting Xie Chaowen's approval. The younger sister was furious, her eyes bloodshot. She shot me a fierce glare. I quietly left the scene and boarded the carriage back to the estate with the others. The polo field gradually faded into the distance. The horse's corpse was loaded onto a wooden cart, its blood dripping down through the gaps in the planks. Drop by drop, they shimmered with golden light under the sun. I stayed alone in the carriage, rubbing my calf as if I had regained something lost. A long-lost sense of pain surged in my heart. I was on the verge of tears. I couldn't believe it. I had actually returned to the age of 17 with my memories intact. I had gone back to this polo match that changed my fate. After my leg was crushed and broken by that horse in my past life, I had resented, hated, and cried until the Marquis's betrothal gifts flowed like a stream into the courtyard. Only then did the people in the capital believe that Xie Chaowen truly intended to marry me. My father advised me, saying perhaps this was just my fate, advising me to think more openly. Loss of a horse by the old man of Sai. If it weren't for this accident, how could our family have ever connected with the Hu household? My stepsister envied me, wishing she had been the one injured instead. Sister, you're so lucky. Couldn't it be that you used some trick? Why did that horse just happen to knock you down and not anyone else? I ignored her completely, my lower leg numb, sitting motionless in the chair, staring blankly at the trunks and boxes strewn all over the courtyard in the bleak late autumn, with moonlight like water. I tried to comfort myself to think more openly. After all, that was Xie Chaowen. Things have come to this point. It was worth it to marry him, even after losing both legs on the day of our wedding. The red candles in the bridal chamber burned all night long, yet Xie Chaowen never even lifted my bridal veil. We sat in silence facing each other until dawn broke. Xie Chaowen changed out of his wedding attire and went straight back to the Zhongfeng Academy. From that day on, everyone in the mansion knew. Though I had exchanged my legs for the position of the heir's wife, I was still disliked by the heir. Everyone in the capital laughed at me, still calling herself a lady of the Shangshu mansion. She's truly foolish beyond measure. How will she live after losing her legs? Probably the prince's heir finds her appearance too unattractive to even look at, can't bring himself to marry her. Ha ha ha. Even though I was crippled and unable to leave the house, those taunts still reached my ears in full. The Princess Royal, though feeling guilty toward me, still prioritized the issue of heirs. Xie Chaowen had always refused to touch me, and over time she no longer treated me with kindness. Lin Yun, didn't your mother teach you how to please your husband? But I lost my mother at 4, and that is indisputable. I could only ask myself over and over if I had truly done wrong, but it wasn't my choice to lose my leg, nor was it my idea to propose marriage. The moment tears fell to the ground, I kept thinking, and thinking, what exactly did I, Xiao Lingyun, do wrong? 3. The 4th year of our marriage, a major incident occurred in the capital. A student from the Hidden Edge Academy achieved the top honors, placing 3rd in the imperial examination. During the palace examination, she removed her official hat on the spot. Her face was delicate and beautiful, with long hair flowing in the wind. It turned out she was a woman disguised as a man. She loudly questioned in the grand hall, asking whether there were also women skilled in scholarship and learning. Why could they not serve in official positions? This act violated ancestral rights and laws, causing shock throughout the hall, yet the emperor chuckled, stroking his beard, praising her for her patience and resilience, calling her a heroine among women. A special sixth-rank official position was created just for her. The entire court, both inside and out, was astonished when Xie Chaowen told me about this matter. The admiration in his eyes was as towering as a giant tree. I knew her true identity while we were still at the academy. She was the most intelligent and diligent female student I've ever met. At that time, though we had no children, we had lived together for a long time and got along well. Hearing this, I smiled and, by the candlelight, embroidered a silk pouch for Xie Jiawen. Indeed, she is a truly unique woman. I heard the emperor is still planning to arrange a marriage for her. I wonder which young man is so fortunate. Xie Jiawen, upon hearing this, gave me a deep, lingering look. The emotions in his eyes were obscure and hard to decipher. He sighed for the first time. He carried me into the bedchamber with his own hands. Lin Yun, let's consummate our marriage. The embroidery needle still in my hand, I was stunned. A needle pricked into her fingertip, drawing a bead of blood. Xie Jiawen took the opportunity to kiss her, moving upward from below. It came fiercely and intensely. After years of waiting in loneliness, she had finally received a response. The emptiness in my chest was completely filled. I didn't struggle, letting Xie Chaowen's force grow heavier and heavier. Each thrust was like venting anger. Finally, it was over. Xie Chaowen lay on top of me, dazed and weary. I reached out to touch, and my hand came away wet with tears. I just stared blankly at the half-embroidered pouch that had fallen to the ground. In my ears came Xie Chaowen's murmurs, one after another, in his sleep. You will never be able to compare to her. After all, Congji, it's me who doesn't deserve you. Congji, Congji, that was the title of the female top scholar. It had already spread throughout the capital. It turns out that the noble and upright Xie Shizi also has someone in his heart whom he loves but cannot have. It turns out that the polo match was specially held for her originally. So the candlelight flickered wildly in my eyes, and the night was deep and quiet. I laughed out loud, feeling utterly absurd. For many more years passed. Jude Congji married and had children, her official rank rising step by step. Xie Chaowen seemed to gradually lose his lingering thoughts as the years went by. After inheriting the title, he treated me with mutual respect, and we lived in harmony, sharing life as equals. The rumors from those days have long blown away with the wind, and no one speaks of our marriage anymore. They only say we are the perfect couple of the capital. They say Xie Jiawen has never left me, devoted to me with unwavering affection. Only I know about Xie Jiawen's study, which no one is ever allowed to enter, filled with portraits of Ju Congji. In the dead of night, when dreams returned, he would always stay inside, delicately painting her eyebrows and eyes, lost in tender intimacy. But I never said a word. I merely played the role of the perfect prince's consort, flawless in the eyes of outsiders. Having no children of my own, I took the initiative to arrange for Xie Chaowen to take 2 concubines. When the concubines gave birth, I willingly took their children under my care. I granted them the status of legitimate sons of the Marquis's household. Over time, the princess no longer held it against me. Xie Jiawen finally also held my hand in front of his friends, sighing, to have such a virtuous wife, what more could a man desire? I hobbled along with my disabled legs, serving as the public figure of the Marquis mansion, but no one knew that behind those gentle and courteous masks, my resentment burned like a wildfire spreading across the plains, wrapped around me, making me cry out in my heart every night. Whenever the rainy season arrives, my useless legs ache with a dull pain, like a bone-deep parasite. It keeps me awake at night, constantly reminding me how I got to where I am today, step by step. On the day he passed away, Xie Chaowen dismissed everyone and held my hand alone. His face showed a look of guilt. He spoke some heartfelt words that had been hidden in his heart for many years. Back then, hurting you was never my intention, and this marriage was not what I desired either. If you hadn't intervened and disrupted everything, I wouldn't have lost my true love and carried this regret to this day. If there is a next life, may we both find peace and never meet again. Blood trickled from the corner of my mouth as I stared at him with calm, dark eyes. She smiled gently. Young master, I don't blame you. How could I possibly blame him? These decades of torment and suffering have turned me into a malevolent ghost. I had long since poured out all the resentment in my heart, in his food, in his clothes, in the incense he burned day after day. I used a poison potent enough to make a person slowly rot from head to toe. How could I let him remain alone in this world? He should repay his apology with concrete actions. I gripped his fingers and straightened up for the last time. I pulled him closer and kissed his lips. Xie Chaowen's eyes widened, and his body trembled. The skin instantly tore and peeled away. Blood flowed uncontrollably. I used all my strength to pin him down, making it impossible for him to struggle. In his nearly clouded pupils, I saw myself laughing heartily. I whispered softly, our cheeks brushing against each other, Xie Chaowen, as husband and wife, we are one. You must accompany me on this journey, Xie Chaowen, let's go together. 5. The early summer breeze carried a chill. I woke up in a daze. The past and its illusions were like flowers in a mirror or the moon reflected in water. I recall the extremely dark eyes of Xie Chaowen just now, still the same as in the previous life, in his 20s, upright and self-restrained, with proper manners, hard to approach. I sighed in relief. Gently rubbing the wound on my arm that had just been scratched by the sword blade, I lowered my gaze and stared for a moment. The coachman stopped the carriage and brought over a stool. Miss, we've arrived, I nodded, rubbing my legs. I pushed aside the curtain to look outside, catch her off guard. My gaze met someone's eyes directly. A suffocating sensation almost surged up from my throat. I wanted to vomit, yet before me were still those eyes I could never forget, even in my dreams. Standing under the eaves, clad in brocade robes, a tiny mole at the corner of his eye faintly visible. Carelessly, she called out to me in a leisurely tone, Xiao Lingyun. I trembled. The car curtain dropped, and no movement came from inside the vehicle. Chuanhe walked over and urged me to get out. Miss, Prince Xie has arrived and is waiting for you at the door. I calmed myself and asked softly, what does he want with me? Chuanhe reached out to support me. He said you left something behind at the polo match and has come to return it. I sneered inwardly. It was merely a task requiring a servant to run an errand. What valuable item would require the prince to personally deliver it? Could it be that Xie Chaowen has also been reborn? I pondered, then stepped down from the carriage a few steps forward. He bowed respectfully. Your Highness, may I ask what I left behind at the polo match that required you to come in person? Though his posture was humble, there was a hint of sarcasm in his words. A flicker of surprise crossed Xie Chaowen's eyes as he lowered his gaze to look at me. For a moment, he remained silent. Decades of torment in my past life, every extra moment spent with him made me feel uncomfortable. I was calculating how to find an excuse to leave. The next moment, Xie Chaowen reached out his hand toward me. He opened his palm. Resting quietly in the center of his palm was a pear blossom hairpin. It was dropped by Miss Xiao when she panicked and fled after the horse ranch incident. I've come personally to apologize. I didn't take it. My expression calm. Just a hairpin, it's not a valuable item. The prince can simply lose it. Is that so? Xie Chaowen let out a light laugh. Stepping forward instead of retreating, inserting the hairpin into my hair, my lover whispers, I saw it. It was you who pushed Xiao Yuqing out. When Xie Chaowen left, my heart was almost leaping out of my chest. The wind swept through the veranda, swirling and tousling my skirt. A chill crept slowly up my body. Chuanhe looked at me timidly, hesitating to speak. Miss, I reached into my hair and pulled out the hairpin that Xie Chaowen had just inserted. It wasn't the pear blossom hairpin he had shown me. Instead, it was a golden-laid, blood-red jade hairpin, exquisitely crafted and ingeniously designed. I remember the words he said to me before I left. I have already mentioned your name to my mother. Soon, the Marquis's household will propose to the minister's residence to seek the hand of the minister's legitimate daughter, Xiao Lingyun. I asked him why it was me. He looked indifferent. Chasing the sun nearly trampled the young lady. As his master, it is only right for me to do this. I quietly gazed at Xie Chaowen. To compensate for the war horse he had personally killed, he offered his lifelong commitment. It's sheer fantasy. It seems he didn't choose me. The princess's carefully planned polo match turned into a complete disaster, ending in failure. The eldest son's marriage remains unresolved. She simply took it upon herself to choose me for Xie Chaowen. She had long since inquired about the family backgrounds of all the women attending the polo match. She knew that my father had not yet arranged a marriage for me, and the Xiao family had a clean reputation, with an official rank that was neither too high nor too low. I was raised in seclusion since childhood, cautious in speech and conduct, with a timid nature. Though my appearance is plain, it is not without its merits in the future. I could endure endless trials and hardships imposed by my husband's family. Xie Chaowen said this merely to deceive me with his words. He truly wanted to marry me from beginning to end. No one ever asked for my opinion. The hairpin pierced my palm, drawing blood. I closed my eyes deeply and let out a soft sigh. Why do you keep chasing after me? Do I have to kill you again to find peace? I let go. The jade hairpin fell to the ground and shattered into 2 pieces. I thought it was truly too fragile. I averted my gaze. The embroidered shoe crushed over it without hesitation. 7. As expected, the 7th day after the polo match, the dowry from the Marquis of Yongning's estate was delivered in boxes upon boxes, just like in the previous life, so much that the courtyard couldn't even hold it all. The housekeeper carefully counted the wedding gifts one by one. I didn't even glance at them. I went straight to my father and knelt down before him. Father, I don't wish to marry. Father scolded me for causing a ruckus. That's the Xie family, close relatives of the emperor, a household with a century-old reputation. The Xie heir is a rare and outstanding young man, 1 in 100 years. To have such a prestigious family offer marriage is a blessing others would beg for. How can you possibly refuse? You must be out of your mind. Yet I have never felt more sober than now. Still, I even feigned a few tears, pretending to be heartbroken. Panicked, I knelt on the ground, trembling uncontrollably. Father, I must be honest, I secretly pledged my life to a man long ago and have lost my purity. If the Xie family finds out, not only will the Ministry of Rights lose face, but our daughter's life may also be in danger. Father, please save me. Having lived for so long in my previous life, I have come to understand some truths. To avoid being bullied and looked down upon, I will take things to the extreme, leaving no room for retreat. My father clutched his chest, unable to believe that his gentle and timid daughter from his memory could commit such a disgraceful act. He grabbed the inkstone beside him and hurled it at me. You lost your mother, and now you've lost all sense of decency. How could you do such a thing? Blood seeped from the temple. I remained silent, crying incessantly. Please. Father, save me. Father told me to get out, saying he would go and discuss with the Marquis's household. I covered my wound and walked out. Chuanhe felt sorry for me. Miss, why did you do this? She was my personal attendant and knew I was lying. She advised me it wasn't worth it. Lord Xie, what a fine husband he is. I didn't say anything. I have used these words to console myself on countless unbearable nights. Xie Chaowen is the kind of husband that women all over the world could only dream of. Yet I have spent countless nights burning the midnight oil. It couldn't even earn a glance from Xie Chaowen. Only then did she realize what it meant to marry a husband who didn't love her. What she gained was a calf that ached with every rainy season. Late at night, her father returned home. Toss a letter onto the table. Very impatient. This is what the young master asked me to give you. He said if you want to break off the engagement, go see him in person. I pulled out the letter and read it. Under the lamp, Xie Chaowen wrote in a style of calligraphy that even the emperor praised endlessly. It was restrained and profound, yet not lacking in sharpness. In the letter, he asked me, is there truly someone you love, or are you simply unwilling to marry me? Xie Chaowen, 8. At the entrance of Zongfeng Academy, crowds surged like a river. I wore a veiled hood, lifting my eyes to gaze at the plaque for a long while. Since its founding, Zongfeng Academy has dedicated itself to teaching and guiding students from humble backgrounds across the land. In my past life, I had difficulty moving around as the legitimate wife of Xie Chaowen. I had never been here before. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward into the place. Elegant eaves, winding corridors, pavilions, and waterside terraces. I heard the clear sound of reading aloud. I was momentarily dazed. I found Xie Chaowen's room and gently knocked on the door. The young servant reported that a woman had come to see him. Xie Chaowen paused his writing and gestured for me to come in. The room was sparsely furnished, Yet every item was of great value: paper and brushes from Jiangnan, heavy ink from northwest China. Even the wolf hairbrush he held between his fingers was coated with golden lacquer at the very tip, tribute grade in the corner. There were scrolls and documents nearly as tall as a person. The wind slipped in through the poorly closed window lattice, the pages fluttered, and I saw the name written on them: Ju Tsongji Xie. Chaowen leaned over his desk, slightly lifting his eyes. "Miss Xiao has arrived. Please take a seat." He instructed his young servant to bring me a chair made of Nanmu wood. It was placed directly opposite him, perfectly centered. I didn't move, obediently lowering my eyes. "Prince, I'm here to break off the engagement." Xie Jiawen finished writing the last annotation, then drew a stroke with the crimson brush on the paper. He lazily rose, his voice restrained. "For the sake of your beloved, I softly acknowledged," and fell silent. Xie Jiawen suddenly laughed. He had been able to see through such clumsy lies since he was 5 years old. A woman who would rather ruin her own reputation than marry him. Interesting. "Then bring that person before me, Miss Xiao." His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, reaching my ears, wrapped in an unyielding pressure that left no room for argument. "Xie is not the kind to snatch someone else's love. Within 7 days, I will meet the person myself, and then I will ask mother to retract her order. If I cannot meet them within 7 days." Xie Jiawen took a few steps forward, pressing closer with each step. "The wedding must proceed as planned." I clenched my hands tightly. He sighed. "It's not that I'm being unreasonable. It's just that my mother has taken a liking to you. I hope Miss Xiao will not make things difficult for me again." 9. When I left, Xie Jiawen did not rise to see me off. His page led the way ahead, a pair of round eyes. Couldn't help but look curiously in my direction. "Are you the wife the crown prince is going to marry?" "Yes, the wife, or perhaps a pawn." I lowered my gaze without a word and followed behind him, turning a few corridors, passing by the pond, blocked by Xiao Yuqing in front, to preserve the face of the Xiao family. My father did not tell others about my intention to break off the engagement. Xiao Yuqing was unaware, showing a mocking expression. "Are you so eager, sister, that you can't wait and must come out to meet your fiancé in secret?" In my past life, she couldn't bear the thought of me, despite my crippled legs, marrying into a noble family. Before our wedding, she had visited Xie Jiawen at Songfeng Academy several times. She subtly and overtly urged him to choose someone else. Just as students were leaving the class, people were coming and going. Some curious glances kept sweeping over me. An idea suddenly occurred to me. I lightly curled my lips and smiled. "It's all thanks to my sister. If that horse hadn't gone mad, perhaps it would have been my sister who was betrothed to the Marquis's household." A flicker of anger flashed in Xiao Yuqing's eyes. She deliberately quickened her pace, brushing past me and giving my shoulder a hard bump. I twisted my ankle and fell into the pond. My clothes were soaked and clung to my body. I floundered and struggled inside. "Help! Help! Help me!" Xiao Yuqing, realizing he had caused trouble, gritted his teeth and hurried away. The young servant rushed off to find Xie Jiawen. The onlookers among the students chattered endlessly, yet not a single one dared to lend a helping hand. "Rumor has it this is the betrothed of Master Xie. How could we possibly dare to save her? Definitely don't act rashly. If we anger the master, it'll be a huge problem. Hurry, hurry, let's pretend we didn't even see this." The crowd was thinning out. My body was growing heavier. It seemed that the instincts from my previous life still lingered in my mind. My calves gradually stiffened, losing their strength. "Wait a little longer." I gritted my teeth, pulled the hairpin from my hair, and stabbed it fiercely into my calf. Blood instantly dyed the water red. The pain spread through every limb and bone in my body. I gasped and tilted my head back. "Help!" the book boy shouted. "The teacher is here." Thud. At the brink of death, someone swam toward me. They cupped my chin, their brows slightly furrowed. "Open your mouth. Breathe." Strands of air were passed into my mouth. He led me ashore. I coughed and narrowed my eyes to look at his face. The person stood with the light behind him. Strands of hair stuck to his face. "Are you okay?" I stood frozen in place. This face, that face I would never forget for the rest of my life. 10. Ju Tsongji. Xie Jiawen's expression changed. In his calm, unruffled eyes, a monstrous surge rose like raging waves. Hurriedly stepping forward, Looking nervous, he snatched the outer robe from the bookboy's hands and handed it to her. His tone was reproachful yet slightly affectionate. Why are you so impulsive? What if someone finds out? Saving a life is a matter of life and death. Who has time to worry about all that? Ju Seongji spoke casually as he took the outer robe, then he draped it over me. After glancing at my pale face, he looked again at my bleeding calf. The way they looked at Xie Chaowen was both respectful and polite. I've already handed today's lessons to Teacher Chi. If there's nothing else, sir, I'll take this young lady to the clinic first. She supported me with both hands, holding me steadily in her arms. She walked straight out without looking back. Xie Chaowen hesitated, clenching his fists and remaining in place from beginning to end. He never once looked at me. My head felt heavy and dizzy as I nestled in Ju Seongji's embrace. At the tip of my nose was the crisp soap fragrance coming from her body. It made me drowsy and sleepy. Miss, if you want to sleep, then go ahead and sleep. The girl wrapped my calf wound with a ribbon and said softly, I will stay by your side. 11. When I woke up again, I was in a simply furnished inner room. The table was covered with scholarly books, their pages turned and curled. Every page was densely filled with annotations. Ju Seongji came in from outside carrying a pot of water and saw that I was awake. She stepped forward to help me sit up. Would you like some water? I looked confused, and she quickly explained, I've already had the doctor take care of the wounds on your forehead and calf. Although you fell into the water and caught a chill, you're in good health, so there shouldn't be any problems. I don't know where you live, so I brought you back with me first. I took the teacup and took a sip. Old tea, with a slightly bitter taste, but it unexpectedly suits my taste. Thank you, miss. Ju Seongji was surprised for a moment, then smiled freely. It's good that you know, I am a woman, so I won't tarnish your reputation, and it saves you from overthinking. I shook my head and placed the teacup on the table, weighing my words carefully. I am engaged to Xie Chaowen, but I don't want to marry him. If you don't want to marry, then don't. Ju Seongji, puzzled, sighed softly. Why must you resort to such a reckless method? Because there's no time left. Rain began to fall outside, tapping softly against the window frame inside. The room was dim, with only a faint light flickering on and off, casting shifting shadows on Ju Seongji's face. I hid in the shadows, letting out a soft sigh. Slowly, I extended my hand, slowly creeping up the tip of Ju Seongji's finger like a venomous snake lying in wait, ready to strike. Bowing low, voice soft and pleading, Miss, by disguising yourself as a man and saving me before everyone, I have lost my purity. Thunder tore through half the sky. I remained expressionless, tears glistening in my eyes. I spoke softly. Things have come to this. Miss, you can only marry me, using the person Xie Chaowen cherishes most. To play the role of a lover seems particularly fitting. To protect her, he must work even harder than I do to conceal her identity. Of course, there was no way to proceed with our marriage anymore. If Ju Seongji refused, I carefully considered ways to force her to agree. Poisoning, or, alright. I suddenly looked up, staring at her in astonishment. Ju Seongji nodded as if it were the most natural thing. Her blue robe washed to a pale shade. She leaned over and used her sleeve to wipe the tears from the corner of my eye. You make a good point. In that case, I should marry you. She pretended to adjust her sleeve, raising an eyebrow as she asked me, shouldn't one first have a fine set of clothes made before getting married? I gazed at her deeply. My throat tightened, and I awkwardly looked down. I suppose it should be, alright, after school tomorrow, take me to choose one. The thunder gradually subsided outside the window. The rain had stopped at some point. 12 on the first day, I fabricated the story of how Ju Seongji and I met. I recounted it to her in detail. Alright, then I shall be your secret lover who has pledged to marry you. Ju Seongji was dressed in a new moon-white outfit, wearing men's attire. Nodding, I sat at the desk reading. Those ancient heroes and valiant men must have possessed extraordinary virtues. There are things that ordinary people cannot bear to endure. When a common man is insulted, he draws his sword and rises to fight, throwing himself into battle. This is not true courage. True courage belongs to those who, when suddenly confronted with danger, remain unshaken. When unjustly attacked, do not become angry. Such people carry within them great aspirations and have lofty ambitions. The voice was soft yet unhurried. Each word clear and distinct. I sat beside her, hurriedly making a sachet as a token of our love, lost in thought. I didn't notice, causing her to misunderstand. She put down her book and turned to look at me sideways. Lingyun, are you going to study? She handed me a book on policy essays. I can teach you. My essays have been praised by the master. They're quite good, not just good in the previous life. Before the Qianyang Hall, under the emperor's throne, she had no fear of her status. Whether it was governing the country as an official or saving the people and killing enemies, she could speak eloquently about everything, unraveling layer by layer, reaching the core. The emperor praised her as the finest young talent since Xie Chaowen. She could have been the top scholar because of her pure and elegant appearance. The emperor granted her the third-place position instead. If she were to teach me writing, that would certainly be a good thing, but I refused. I know nothing about writing. When my mother was still alive, she taught me the 1,000-character classic. I was distracted by the birds outside the window after reading just a few pages or pretending to hold an embroidery needle and make something. Mother praised me. Our Lingyun might be interested in needlework. I shook my head with pursed lips. No, I'm not, because the embroidery needle is the closest thing I can get to a dagger, a sword, or a spear. This dream sounds too unrealistic to share, but Xiao Lingyun, raised within the inner chambers, actually wants to become a female general galloping across the battlefield. In my previous life, I broke my leg, making horseback riding and archery impossible. As a lady of the Hu family for decades, Xie Chaowen, as a scholar, had nothing but endless stacks of paper and ink in the house, with no trace of swords or blades, so suffocating, I almost felt like vomiting. I gave a bitter smile and lifted my eyes to look at Ju Tsongji's expression. Does that sound unrealistic? She put down the book and thought it over seriously. It does seem a bit late to start learning now. My heart sank. She took the barely embroidered pouch from my hand and replaced it with a book of military strategy. But it doesn't matter. It's never too late for a woman to do anything. You know, I didn't start learning to read until I was 11. Step by step, I made my way to where I am now, eventually rising to the rank of first-grade official. How difficult it must have been. She examined the purse carefully, then tucked it away neatly. Joy sparkled in her eyes. Your hands are so skillful. Surely you'll dance the sword beautifully in the future. You read some books first. When we get married, you can go to the border with peace of mind to make your mark, with me. Here, no one can stop you. 13. Ever since Xiao Lingyun fell into the water, Xie Chaowen has been sleeping poorly these days, tossing and turning. He always dreams of himself sitting in front of a chessboard, playing a game of chess with another person. That person was roughly the same age as himself. His whole body was covered with festering wounds, with flesh torn and exposed. His face was wrapped in bandages. A pair of hollow eyes stared at him eerily. A black piece was placed on the board. Why didn't you save her? Why didn't you save Xiao Lingyun? Xie Chaowen furrowed his brow, uncontrollably placing a white piece. Who are you, really? The man chuckled softly, his bones creaking audibly. Of course, I am you, the you who was killed by Xiao Lingyun with his own hands. Xie Chaowen widened his eyes. Nonsense, you fool. The man murmured softly, then stood up. The strips of cloth on his face fell away completely, revealing a face identical to Xie Chaowen's. He clung to Xie Chaowen, repeatedly telling him, "Stop waiting. What are you still running from? You'll never hold on to Ju Tsongji in this lifetime. You can't even keep Xiao Lingyun. Jueri didn't break her leg. She's definitely going to run. You have to stop her. Stop her. She was my wife for decades, but she killed me. She killed you. If you get another chance, you must break her legs, force her to be your wife, and make her suffer for the rest of her life." Xie Chaowen, did you hear that? To take revenge. You must make her suffer a fate like mine, never to die well for the rest of her life. The ghostly figure vanished and left. Early summer, the afternoon breeze blew in, rustling the pages of the book with a loud whisper. Xie Chaowen's back was drenched in cold sweat. He closed his eyes tightly, his expression remaining calm as usual, but his hands, without realizing it, clenched tightly, smudging the unfinished text. "Sir, are you awake?" The book boy gently knocked on the door, showing utmost Respect. Xie Chaowen tidied up the documents on his desk, rolling up those troublesome items and tossing them aside. What's the matter? The book boy reported. Miss Xiao has arrived. It seems she has conceded. Xie Chaowen leaned back in his chair with great interest, idly twisting the gold lacquer on the pen tip. He had already spread the news of the engagement between the two families. No one would dare to claim the title of her lover, no matter how bold or fearless they might be. Xie Chaowen had lived for over 20 years, priding himself on being a calm and self-possessed gentleman. Yet, when facing Xiao Lingyun, he always felt a childish sense of unwillingness. His mother truly understood him. Among those petty and dull noble ladies, she had chosen an interesting one. Let her in, he thought. That ghost was simply talking nonsense. Unexpectedly, the book boy hesitated for a moment. Zhu Xuezhi is also here. What? Xie Chaowen froze for a moment, unable to react in time. The door was pushed open. I held Zhu Congji's hand and slowly walked up to Xie Chaowen, bowing in respect. Your Highness, I have brought my beloved. Please, as previously agreed, cancel the marriage arrangement. 14. Xie Chaowen was extremely rare in losing his temper that day, suppressing his anger. He gritted his teeth and asked Zhu Congji if she was being threatened. If she's using the debt from that day when she fell into the water to coerce you, I can. Zhu Congji interrupted him, speaking with complete honesty. She fiddled with the pouch at her waist. Miss Lingyun is wonderful, and to marry her is my great fortune. I willingly accept it. But you? I quietly crouched behind Zhu Congji like a frightened rabbit through the veil. I quietly watched Xie Chaowen's hesitant expression, as if he wanted to speak but held back. As I expected, to protect the one he loved, he could never reveal her identity in front of any outsider. He could only stare at me intensely. I leaned close to Zhu Congji. Inhaling the scent of soap on her body, I silently curled the corner of my mouth, feeling quite proud. Yet I also felt that I truly was despicable. Prince, please grant me and Zhu Lang this chance. The voice carried a tone of dependence, slightly exaggerated and theatrical. It even made Zhu Congji laugh. In the end, it forced Xie Chaowen to nod in agreement. Before leaving, he kept me behind alone. I'll wait for you outside. Zhu Congji patted my hand and gave me a reassuring look. The door opened and closed. I stood still with my hands hanging down, my voice calm and detached. The engagement is off. What more does the prince want to say to me? Xie Chaowen suddenly smiled. He stepped forward, closing in relentlessly. Did you find out something? I pretended to be clueless. He saw right through me. First, you pushed your stepsister, then you schemed to have her fall into the water, and now you bring her before me to force me to break off the engagement. In your eyes, I am more terrifying than floods and wild beasts. Yet after much thought, I cannot recall ever having done anything to you. The gold-lacquered wolf hairbrush he cherished so dearly was blown to the ground. He stepped on it without hesitation. The Buddhist scriptures say that those who kill find it difficult to enter the cycle of reincarnation, wandering endlessly by the banks of the river of forgetfulness, becoming malevolent spirits bound by unresolved obsessions. Lingyun looks like this, he whispered softly, his fingers brushing past my cheek. It truly resembles him quite a bit. Is that so? I murmured softly, taking a few steps back. Stepping away from the room, Xie Chaowen stood still in place. The sunlight was intense, pouring down like golden waves, yet he continued to stare at me, unblinkingly. In a daze, I was on him. I saw Xie Chaowen from my past life. 15. The act must be played out in full. I began to prepare for my wedding with Zhu Congji. Xiao Yuqing would seize any opportunity to mock with cold sarcasm. Sister has truly gone mad, abandoning such a fine marriage match to insist on marrying a poor, shabby scholar. I lifted my eyelids and tossed the embroidery needle in my hand. The needle tip grazed her face, startling her into a low gasp. I smiled with my eyes half closed, my eyebrows and eyes curving gently. Zhu Congji introduced me to a scholar surnamed Zhao from the academy. His family has practiced martial arts for generations, and he is exceptionally skilled. Yet, strangely, he's not very bright when it comes to studying. Zhu Congji offered to help me with my studies, and that student immediately agreed to teach me martial arts. Just as my father had completely given up on me and no longer wanted to bother with me, I also got the chance, practicing horse stance, stepping on tree stumps, swinging wooden swords. I was thoroughly enjoying my studies, drenched in sweat. Only then, with each breath, did I truly taste the essence of being alive, the vastness of heaven and earth. My whole heart and mind were devoted to martial training. Naturally, I didn't notice, not far from me, a figure stood quietly. His face was dark and gloomy, like a ghost. Ever since Xie Chaowen took the initiative to break off the engagement with the princess, he had been dreaming of that person more and more often, kept murmuring and pestering me with questions beside my ear. Why did you let her go? Calling out over and over again, Xiao Lingyun, Xiao Lingyun. He covered his ears, unwilling to listen, yet the sound seemed to emerge from within his very bones. It tormented him without respite. He couldn't help but demand, "What's so great about that woman?" The other man sneered, "Do you think I loved her?" It was hatred, it was resentment that drove him to never rest until death. But love and hate are one and the same. So Xie Chaowen had someone inquire about her news. After learning she was practicing martial arts, he personally came to see for himself. Could such a frail body really draw a bow and arrow? He was completely captivated. His heart pounded rapidly. He seemed to taste something different from Xiao Lingyun. He saw the wound on her palm. A sour ache would flow out from the heart. That person was right. He shouldn't have let her go. 16. Ju Tsongji and I were making plans. On the day of the wedding, I faked my death and left, changing my name to join the military camp. In this way, I fulfilled my own wishes and did not hinder Ju Tsongji from taking the imperial examinations, nothing more than dressing as a man like you. By the time I've achieved success and made a name for myself, I'll lift my robe and show the world what women are capable of. I was filled with longing and hope. Ju Tsongji was delighted too. All right, then I'll handle the writing and you'll handle the martial arts. Together, we'll be unmatched in the world. I laughed happily upon hearing this. In this life, with both legs intact, I can finally go wherever I please. A brand new world slowly unfolds before my eyes. Before boarding the bridal sedan chair, I loaded everything that could be useful on the battlefield. Then I stepped into the small sedan chair. Since it was a marriage of lower status, the ceremony was not grand. There were very few people accompanying me. There were still faint whispers from the common folk along the road. In my heart, I pictured the setting sun over the desert. I had no time to pay attention, but before I knew it, the sedan chair came to a stop. I tilted my head up and saw the plaque of the Marquis's residence. 17. The candlelight flickered faintly. It cast Xie Chaowen's face into a blurry haze. He locked me in a secret chamber and gently fastened a chain around me, preventing me from breaking free. The red veil had long disappeared. I chuckled, making no resistance. I merely tilted my head to look at him. Was the gentleman everyone in the capital admired actually a madman in private? Xie Chaowen said nothing upon hearing this, only letting out a sigh. "Lingyun, this is what you owe me." He picked up an iron hammer from the corner and slowly moved it in front of me, looking at me intently. "If you were to marry me, you certainly wouldn't wear such a simple wedding dress." I forced myself to look away from that iron hammer. I asked hoarsely, "What exactly do you want to do?" Someone told me, "If I break your legs, you won't run away anymore." Xie Chaowen's voice echoed in the dark room. "I just want you to stay." Xie Chaowen raised the iron hammer. A long-forgotten despair clung to my chest. "No, Xie Jiawen, I beg you." Tears rolled like pearls, soaking my wedding gown. I trembled all over. I cannot go back to how I was before. I absolutely refuse to return to that state of living worse than death. Someone, please save me. I couldn't help but pray to the gods, to the bodhisattvas. Even if just one person came, that would be fine. Please help me. Xie Chaowen gently wiped away my tears with his thumb and coaxed me in a low voice. "Lingyun, don't cry, I'll be quick." The iron hammer came into view. I shut my eyes tightly and screamed. No, the door to the dark room was violently smashed open. Ju Tsongji stood where the moonlight streamed in, red brocade robe, long hair wildly dancing. He fiercely smashed the candlestick beside him. "Lingyun." Fortunately, Xie Chaowen still cared about his reputation, so the location of the secret chamber was remote. No one had been guarding it. Xie Jiawen couldn't believe it, turned around, and froze in place. "How could you, Ju?" Tsongji stared intently, resolute and unwavering. "You still know too little about me, sir. Flames licked up the curtains. She kept working non-stop to unfasten my chains. Don't cry, your husband is here to save you. At a time like this, she still had the mood to joke. I laughed through my tears. I grabbed her hand and ran out after her. No, Xie Chaowen looked conflicted and hurried forward to grab the hem of my clothes. Ju Tsungji called out to him word by word, "Sir." Xie Chaowen was instantly frozen in place by those words. He began his education at the age of 3, and his teacher asked him about his aspirations. Though his speech was unclear, he answered earnestly, "To shelter all scholars under my wing, to unite knowledge and action, and to live with a clear conscience." But now what on earth is he doing? Xie Jiawen gave a bitter smile, standing in the center of the blazing fire, quietly gazing at our retreating backs. I picked up the bundle from the corner, then pulled out a small, delicate bow and arrow from inside. His gaze sharpened, and he turned without hesitation. He aimed the arrow tip directly at Xie Chaowen's heart, aiming at the vengeful spirit clinging tightly to his back. The wedding dress fluttered wildly. I silently mouthed the words, "Xie Chaowen, go die." An arrow pierced through the heart. Xie Chaowen, dazed, touched his chest and let out a low chuckle. Forget it. He fell face up into the sea of flames. No trace of him could be seen anymore. 18. Ju Tsungji helped me crawl out of the hidden room. Then, without stopping, she brought me a horse. According to the original plan, you should take advantage of the chaos to leave the city. Go quickly. I looked at her with reddened eyes. Will you blame me? Ju Tsungji fell silent for a moment. He is a good teacher, but that's all there is to it. I mounted my horse, my gaze lingering on her. Do you know everything? I did it willingly. When I first arrived in the capital, I had no money and was huddled in a dilapidated temple, studying. A girl passed by while worshipping at the temple, bought me many buns, and even held an umbrella over me. Ju Tsungji gazed at me deeply. Those were the best buns I've ever eaten, and my favorite rainy day. Lingyun, you are the best girl I have ever met. I am willing to do anything you ask. She cracked her whip and urged her horse forward, telling me not to worry about her. Don't worry, the emperor values talent, and I am exceptionally gifted. She reminded me again, be careful out there, I'll be waiting to hear the good news of you defending our country, General Xiao. I'll miss you. I nodded, my voice choked with emotion. The figure melted into the night, leaving everything from the past far behind. The horse ran faster and faster, stepping on broken branches, crossing streams, everything I once dreamed of. Finally, the moon I could hold in my hands. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. When the Xie family was wrongfully imprisoned, I, as Xie Yaro's betrothed, rolled on a bed of nails and struck the grievance drum to clear their name. Afterwards, Xie Yaro kept his promise and married me. I managed the household affairs for him, bore and raised children, and before long, I became bedridden with illness. Yet, on my deathbed, he threw a letter of divorce in my face and made my own children call Shenjiwan's memorial tablet mother. I could have married Wanwan. But you had to go and complicate things, causing her to die alone and in misery. I swallowed my resentment unwillingly. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day the Xie family was imprisoned. The February wind still carried a slight chill. I sat quietly by the window, staring blankly at the bright-faced young girl in the bronze mirror, still unable to shake off the sorrowful mood. The maid, Zhua, hurried over with small, flustered steps, carrying a food box. Miss, something terrible has happened. Her face filled with panic, she poured out the news she had heard as if spilling a bag of beans. I just passed by the front courtyard and saw the masters of the Xie family being taken away by the officials. It seems they've committed some serious offense. Do you think we should cut ties and return to Yunju? I'm afraid it might implicate you. Hearing these words, I finally felt a sense of reality about being reborn in this life. In my previous life, Zhua had advised me in the same way. I refused to stand by and watch, stubbornly wading into the murky waters of the Xie family. It was all because, on her deathbed, my mother couldn't rest easy and insisted I go to the capital with a marriage contract in hand. First, to seek protection, and second, to find my father, whose identity remains unknown. She believed that since Lady Xie was her childhood confidant, regardless of whether the marriage would come to pass, she would surely look after the daughter of an old friend. Moreover, she had once done a favor for Lady Xie, but my mother didn't know, and neither did I at the time, that being an ungrateful wretch was a trait passed down through the generations. Naturally, Lady Xie was unwilling to let her promising legitimate son marry a lone orphan girl. But she also couldn't bear to part with my substantial dowry, so she had me stay in a remote courtyard of the Xie residence, occasionally taking a thing or two from me. She even claimed she would help inquire about my father's whereabouts in my youth. I was still naive and ignorant, unable to see the schemes of others, and felt nothing but gratitude toward the Xie family. Later, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. When Lord Xie, the governor of the capital, was falsely accused of treason and colluding with the enemy, and his entire family was thrown into prison, even his former in-laws kept their distance. It was I who ran around everywhere, using money to bribe officials high and low, sparing them from physical torture. It was also I who painstakingly gathered evidence, rolled over a bed of nails to strike the grievance drum, and cleared the Xie family's name. I had only seen Xie Yarrow twice from behind a screen, so I couldn't say I had deep feelings for him. However, the law at the time stipulated that unrelated individuals were not allowed to strike the grievance drum arbitrarily. Thus, I had no choice but to act under the identity of Xie Yarrow's betrothed wife. He, however, believed that I would do anything to marry him, and for that, he hated me to the bone. The pain of rolling on a bed of nails pierced deep into my bones. Even after so much time has passed, I still cannot forget the sight of my clothes soaked through with blood. The sharp needles pierced through flesh, the pain so intense it left a bitter taste in my mouth. From then on, I developed a blood deficiency condition. If Xie Yarrow dislikes me, he could just say it outright. I would return to Yunju. I would never cling to him relentlessly. Yet he married me for the sake of his reputation, and then blamed his beloved's death entirely on me, claiming that I was meddling unnecessarily, making sure I could find no peace, neither in life nor in death. Fortunately, there is still a chance to start over in this life. I have abandoned my useless kindness. Let's see how Xie Yarrow can escape from prison. Thinking of this, I took out the silver notes and instructed, "Good Zhua, you're right, we must leave the Xie family quickly. We can no longer stay here. Go find a decent courtyard and buy it." "Yes." Pearl's eyes lit up as she said indignantly, "If you ask me, you should have left this shabby place long ago. The roof in this courtyard has several holes in it. Even beggars from outside wouldn't want to live here." I pursed my lips and smiled without saying a word. Though her words were a bit exaggerated, it was clear that Lady Xie truly didn't regard me highly, merely seeing me as a distant relative coming to seek favors. If they were truly willing to honor the marriage agreement, how could they treat us so lightly? The Xie family was indeed in complete chaos. Most of the servants were busy packing their belongings and fleeing, just as Zhua had rented a carriage and we, master and servant, were loading our luggage onto it. An unexpected guest suddenly arrived. The woman was dressed in plain white robes, standing gracefully, her autumn water eyes seeming to speak yet holding back. It was none other than Shen Jiwan, the cousin whom Xie Yarrow could never forget, Sister Jiang. "Are you leaving too?" For a moment, I was dazed, unable to recall how she had died. "What are you talking about, Miss Shen?" I asked her. "Are you also a traitor who colludes with the enemy?" A look of astonishment appeared on Shen Jiwan's delicate face. "Of course not, Sister Jiang, don't speak nonsense. If not, then why are you still here?" I brushed the dust off my skirt, not wanting to say more to her, and turned to step onto the carriage stool. Shen Jiwan, however, grew anxious. She stepped forward and grabbed my sleeve. "You and my cousin have a marriage agreement. How can you stand by and do nothing?" I scoffed lightly. The Xie family has never formally proposed with the 3 matchmakers and 6 betrothal gifts. What marriage agreement are you talking about? Moreover, Lady Xie is a daughter of the Shen family. If even the Shen family doesn't intervene, how could it possibly be my place as a guest staying here to meddle in others' affairs? I emphasized the word guest heavily, then shouted toward the door, adding insult to injury by saying, "If I had known the Xie family was so disloyal and dishonorable, I would have rather stayed in a dilapidated temple by the bridge than ever set foot in the Xie household." expecting me to contribute effort just so she can take credit. How shameless! Shen Jiwan's face turned pale with anger, but she couldn't find the words to refute me, so she could only watch me leave with resentment. The newly purchased courtyard is located in the 6th lane of East Street. It's very close to the Imperial College, and although the land price is high, the area is patrolled by the Imperial Guards, making it much safer than other places. My mother left me a substantial dowry, enough to last several lifetimes. Watching Zhua bustling around the new courtyard like a little bee, my cold, hardened heart couldn't help but soften a little. In my past life, I let myself down, and I let her down too when I was gravely ill. Xie Yao refused to call a doctor to examine me, saying coldly, "Wanwan died because of you. It would be better for you to go down early and atone for your sins." It was Pearl who risked her life to fetch medicine from the clinic, allowing me to cling to life a little longer. But such a good-hearted Pearl was ultimately beaten to death on Xie Yao's orders, her body battered and blooded right before my eyes. Miss, her playful voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Pearl pointed excitedly at a portrait in the study and said, "The person in the painting looks so much like you." I looked up and was so shocked that I couldn't speak. The portrait was framed with bamboo and hung on the wall. The woman on the paper had bright, lively eyes, exactly as I look now. But how could there be a portrait of me here? Go and find out who lived here before. Zhua acknowledged the order with a respectful reply. While investigating the origin of the portrait, I also kept an eye on the situation with the Xie family. The Xie family, relying on the fact that their eldest daughter was a princess consort, initially failed to grasp the severity of their situation upon entering prison and behaved with extreme arrogance. The refined Lord Xie even demanded a mirror to tidy his hair. However, without my intervention in this lifetime, they soon learned their lesson the hard way. Every day, their meals were spoiled and their water was foul. If you speak any louder, the jailer's salt-soaked whip will mercilessly strike you. Be grateful you have something to eat. Do you still think you're some high and mighty noble? It is said that Xie Yao was struck by a whip that night and developed a high fever, mumbling incessantly, "I am the chief grand secretary of the court," and similar words. Everyone thought he was delirious with fever, but my heart sank because in my previous life, before I passed away, Xie Yao had indeed ascended to the position of chief minister. Soon, Shen Jiwan came to visit again. She probably noticed my impatience and got straight to the point. "Sister Jiang, I'm here to pass on a message. Auntie said she has some news about your father and would like you to visit her in prison." I had no intention of paying her any attention, but searching for my father had already become an obsession, not just for myself, but also for my mother, who passed away with regrets. After a moment of thought, I agreed. "I will go visit Lady Xie." Shen Jiwan smiled faintly upon hearing this. She touched the golden hairpin on her head, put on her veil, and left as if she had resolved some important matter. How strange, her clothes were so old they had turned white. So where did that stylish gold hairpin come from? I lightly tapped my fingers on the wooden table, keeping my doubts hidden in my heart, and stood up to head toward the Dali temple. As the saying goes, petty officials are the hardest to deal with. Those who manage to become prison wardens in the Dali temple all have some skills, more or less, but as long as you pay, they won't make things difficult. You may only stay for the time it takes half an incense stick to burn. "Young lady, don't break the rules," he reminded me, then glanced at my empty sleeves, assuming I was visiting a relative. "Aren't you bringing any food or clothes?" "There's no extra charge for that." I waved my hand, putting on a righteous expression. "No need. For a family like the Xies, who collude with the enemy and betray the nation, it's better to save the food for the soldiers at the border." The jailer gave an approving look upon hearing this. In the dimly lit dungeon, I followed closely behind him, step by step. From afar, I could already hear that deeply familiar voice. "Yaoa, are you truly certain that Jiang Ningyue can help us escape?" "Mother, rest assured. As long as she is willing to beat the grievance drum, the Xie family will be safe and sound. But I've heard that beating the grievance drum requires rolling on a bed of nails, a near fatal ordeal. How could she possibly agree?" Lady Xie hesitated. I stopped in my tracks, a sarcastic smile curling at the corners of my lips. So they were not unaware of my sacrifices, it's just that when the blade doesn't cut their own flesh, they don't feel the pain through the wall. Xie Yaro's tone grew increasingly cold and detached. Jiang Ningyue loves me deeply, she won't refuse. At worst, I'll just promise to marry her. Heaven have pity, my child has suffered. The jailer beside me slapped his thigh hard. Damn, so cunning. I wonder which poor girl was so unlucky and blind. I clasped my hands and bowed slightly, my voice as faint as a mosquito's hum. Unfortunately, it was me. In the dim light, the jailer widened his eyes in disbelief. He kicked at a rat scurrying past his feet. Ah, the moon at noon today is truly round. Xie Yaro didn't expect me to appear at this moment. He leaned against the bluestone wall, a sickly flush appearing on his pale, gaunt cheeks. With just one glance, I knew that this scoundrel Xie Yaro had also been reborn. Cough, cough, he paused for a moment, then covered his face and called out, Ningyu. I suppressed the urge to vomit and gave a slight nod in response. To be honest, the Xie family members all had rather handsome faces, but after days without washing, the fleas tangled in their dark hair could easily diminish their charm from a perfect 10 to a mere 3. Better to leave a little room for imagination. The faint clinking of iron chains echoed through the dungeon. Lord Xie, standing outside the cell bars, asked me with a worried frown, my dear niece, did you bring a mirror and comb? He had always been particular, brewing tea only with mountain spring water, wearing only silk garments, freely squandering my dowry, yet never speaking a single word of fairness on my behalf. The cell was burning the lowest grade of charcoal, with thick, choking smoke billowing out. It was bought with Lady Xie's last jade hairpin. The prison was bitterly cold, and she feared her only son wouldn't survive, meeting his end and heading to the western heavens. Meanwhile, the trouble-causing Lord Xie was only concerned about his tangled, handsome beard. Just as I only care about when the axe will fall upon the necks of the Xie family. Madame Xie took my wrist and began to reminisce in detail about how deep her friendship with my mother had been in the past, but all I could think was how cold her hand felt, just as cold as that bitter winter in my past life, when she made me attend to her day and night, draining my blood for her medicine. I'm tired of listening to her ramble on about useless things. Auntie, what did you call me here to discuss? What news about my father? And what aspect is it about? Lady Xie's words came to an abrupt halt. That kind and gentle face showed an untimely hint of disdain. Didn't your mother teach you? When elders are speaking, don't. Xie Yaro interrupted her. Mother, let me talk to Ningyu. He couldn't help but cough twice before gazing at me with deep affection. I invited you here to discuss our marriage. You are a good woman, and I shouldn't delay you, but I can't bear to see you marry someone else. There's no one easier to fool than you. If you don't mind, after I'm released from prison, I'll marry you with a grand procession. How about that? So you must do your best to save me. There is just one thing I need to make clear to you in advance. My cousin has done so much for me, and I intend to take her as my secondary wife. When the time comes, you must not make things difficult for her. It's best not to delay in sounding the grievance drum. Once you find the evidence, go as soon as possible. I listened to his matter-of-fact tone and laughed. I pulled the thin marriage certificate from my chest, tore it in two, and threw it in his face. Each word struck with a dull thud, each syllable piercing to the bone. Who said I don't despise it? I despise it to death. What kind of respectable daughter would marry a disloyal, unrighteous traitor who colludes with the enemy? Do I, Jiang Ningyue, look like someone who collects swill? A gentleman has his own principles. If I were you, I would have already hung myself from a beam, ended it all sooner rather than later, and at least preserved some shred of dignity. The jailer on the side clapped and cheered. Exactly. What a nerve you have. Xie Yaro had never imagined that such harsh words would come from my mouth. He clenched his prison uniform tightly, his face turning ashen as he struggled to suppress the fury in his eyes. Do you not care at all about the feelings we once shared? Not a single trace. Lady Xie wanted to retort angrily, but Lord Xie covered her mouth. I brushed the dust off my sleeve. Half an incense stick's time is almost up. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Xie Yaro half closed his eyes and finally relented, calling out to stop me. Don't you want to know about your father either? See, He always knows how to hit my weak spot in the previous life. It was the 2 children, and in this life I stopped and turned to look at him, nodding earnestly. Yes, I do. As long as you help me find a letter from my father's study and deliver it to the Deputy Minister of the Court of Judicial Review, I will share this information with you. He raised 4 fingers to the sky. If you don't believe me, I can swear an oath. May I be struck by lightning if I speak falsely. Suddenly, a torrential downpour began outside the latticed window, and in a flash of lightning, a thunderclap erupted, startling everyone and making their scalps tingle. That letter was the crucial piece of evidence in this case of colluding with the enemy and treason. The signature inside bore the true culprit's name. The mediocre Lord Xie was merely a scapegoat. I beckoned him and walked to a secluded corner. An unbearable stench seeped from Xie Yaro's flesh. You know, that letter you mentioned. I tilted my head so he could hear these cruel words clearly. I burned them all on the day I returned. If the Xie family were to survive by some lucky chance because of a message, then, Father, I'd rather consider you dead with that. I clapped my hands and called out to the jailer, let's go. Behind me that handsome face now showed a look of horror. Xie Yaro stared blankly, collapsing to the ground, and slowly uttered 2 words under everyone's worried expressions. It's over, later. According to my friend Liang the jailer, who was much older than me, young Master Xie, unwilling to give up, painted the exact same picture for Shen Jiwan, trying to get her to roll on the nail bed and beat the grievance drum. However, Shen Jiwan was no pushover either, whether out of guilt or something else. After making excuses to demand the money, she never appeared before the Xie family again. No one spoke up for the Xie family, and the charges were quickly settled. The male members of the main branch were sentenced to execution in the autumn, while the women were sent to the palace service. On the day of the execution, I deliberately brought Zhua along to watch. People naturally love to watch a spectacle. I squeezed through the crowd, scattering copper coins as I went, and called out, make way, and so, the people were only concerned with picking up the money. On the execution ground, the Xie family knelt in rows on the platform, their heads covered with black cloth. Are they innocent? Not at all. Most of the Xie family's younger generation have engaged in extorting the people's wealth and forcibly seizing women. Back when I was reviewing the account books, I discovered tens of thousands of acres of privately owned land of unknown origin. The tenants, who toiled diligently to grow the grain, ended up with only 10% of the harvest, while the remaining 90% supported the colossal Xie family. I suggested to my mother-in-law that we cut back a little, but she scolded me harshly, saying a merchant's daughter doesn't know how to manage a household and is unfit for important matters. The sky was overcast with dark clouds, and a sparse rain began to fall. The executioner raised his blade and brought it down swiftly, and a round object rolled away on the ground, rain mixed with blood, forming a winding stream, much like the hatred pouring out from my heart. I deliberately found the spot where Xie Yaro was and widened my eyes to look. However, when the object rolled to a spot not far from my feet, my brow twitched heavily. It wasn't him. This person was not Xie Yaro. After years of marriage, I knew every part of his body like the back of my hand. There should have been a blue birthmark on the nape of Xie Yaro's neck. I wore a veil hat, letting the raindrops patter on my shoulders, my cloth shoes soaked and sticking to my feet, my mind heavy with worry. Miss, at some point, a clear, crisp voice sounded by my ear. Someone pressed an oil paper umbrella into my arms. Go home early, don't catch a cold. I couldn't make out his face clearly, but I could see a bright red cinnabar mole on his distinctly jointed wrist. Not long after he ran off, Zhua came out of the shop holding an umbrella, stomping her foot in frustration. Miss, why are you standing in the rain again? Silly Zhua, I sighed. Your young lady is deep in thought. Rain can clear one's mind. Xie Yaro is a man who holds grudges and is quite clever, like a venomous snake lurking in the shadows. Not to mention, he also has the experiences from his previous life. I won't rest until I see him dead with my own eyes. I need to think carefully about who got him out of prison. Pearl couldn't persuade me otherwise, so she had no choice but to go back and prepare ginger soup to ward off the cold. To my surprise, when we returned to the courtyard, an unfamiliar visitor was standing right at the entrance. The man was tall and imposing, dressed in the robes of a Guozijian scholar, with sharp, slightly upturned phoenix eyes that gleamed with intensity. He raised his hand hesitantly, as if unsure whether to knock. Zhua planted her hands on her hips and stepped forward, shouting, "Where did this scoundrel come from, daring to cause trouble at your grandmother's doorstep?" His face flushed red, and he clasped his hands in apology, the cinnabar mole on his wrist catching the light. My apologies, I did not mean to disturb you. I am the previous tenant here. I left in a hurry for my studies abroad and accidentally left behind a portrait when I moved out. May I ask if you have seen it, miss? That portrait is extremely important to me. I am willing to pay to get it back." I lifted my veil and smiled at him slowly, handing over the oil paper umbrella in my hand. "I don't have the portrait, but I do have an umbrella. Do you still want it?" He Yuching stood frozen in place, his eyes vacant. The tips of his ears flushed red, and stammered out, "Zhejiang Nyangzi." I still have a vague impression of He Yuching after all. That face was truly handsome back then. On the way from Yunju to the capital, a great flood occurred. I ordered the boatman to pull him out of the water and place him on my own boat. At that time, I had saved many people, and he was just one of them. I never expected we would meet again. What I never imagined was that this fellow had secretly kept a portrait of me. The rain gradually grew heavier, so I invited him into the courtyard to take shelter under the eaves for a while. "Ginger tea is here." The little maid brought out a large bowl of steaming ginger tea and placed it in front of me, then stood to the side, glaring fiercely at He Yuching. The rough working women in the yard were sweeping fallen leaves, and the newly hired cook's skills were quite good. I took a sip of the sweet ginger tea with brown sugar and casually pushed the pink porcelain teapot on the table toward him. "Help yourself, Master He." "Thank you, Lady Jiang, for forgiving my offense." He Yuching poured himself a cup of cold tea and awkwardly began to explain, "You saved my life. After we parted in Tongju, I privately painted your portrait in order to find your whereabouts." If his face hadn't been so red and he hadn't been shifting around as if sitting on pins and needles, I might have believed him. However, sometimes the truth isn't that important. What matters is that he is a student of the Imperial College with the prestigious title of Duran. Now, I no longer wish to cultivate good karma, I just want to pluck the fruit directly. "Has the gentleman been well in recent years?" He Yuching nodded. "Thanks to the lady's daily acts of kindness back then, I was able to participate in the provincial examination and later enter the Imperial College to study." He asked again, "And you, have you found any trace of your uncle?" I shook my head, my expression darkening. "Damn Xie Yao. He must have known something in his previous life." At this thought, my desire to kill grew even stronger. Hateful. The message left by my father is too little. I only know that his surname is Wen, and he was a merchant from the capital. I paused briefly, gesturing with my hand. Mother said he was about this tall, even more beautiful than the courtesan. The man watched my movements, a faint smile appearing in his beautiful phoenix eyes. He wasn't as reserved as Xie Yao, but instead flashed a bright smile and gently patted the table. "What a coincidence. I have a classmate surnamed Wen, who is exceptionally graceful and comes from a family that has been in business for many years. He might actually be related to your uncle." Ah, I hadn't expected such an unexpected delight. Containing my excitement, I asked He Yuching for the name of this classmate. "He You said this person is cold by nature, devoted solely to studying the classics, and never interacts with others, making it unlikely to encounter him outside the Imperial College. Moreover, it is difficult for outsiders to enter the Imperial College without approval. Rest assured, madam, I will do my best to help." "You inquire." The rain had stopped at some point, and the banana leaves in the courtyard swayed, forming a puddle of water. The sky was turning fish-belly white at the horizon, and the sound of the night watchman's drum echoed from outside. I didn't respond to his promise, only smiled and said, "It's getting late, Lord He. You should go back now." Experience had already taught me that trusting the words of a man would only lead to regret sooner or later. From that day on, I became busy. Officials have their ways, and rats have their paths. In the capital, there is a place specifically for selling information, known as the All-Knowing Sage. It happened to be a day off, and the all-knowing sage initially did not want to take on this business. I angrily offered 1,000 taels of gold and became their honored guest. I bought 3 pieces of information. Father's whereabouts couldn't be traced for the time being. Xie Yarou had pulled off a switch within the Dali temple, and their underlings didn't dare to reach inside. I settled for the next best thing and asked for Shen Jiwan's address, as well as the method to enter the Imperial College. Xie Yarou would definitely be unable to resist going to find Shen Jiwan. After all, she was the one he had longed for across 2 lifetimes. Seeing how generous I was with my spending, they were quite willing to fabricate an identity for me, a cook at the Imperial College. Many students have complained that the canteen cooks are simply unbearable, so the academic supervisor entrusted us with finding a cook from a respectable background. And as for He Yuqing's appearance, was it a coincidence or was it orchestrated? It has been a long time since I last practiced cooking in my previous life. In order to get closer to my newlywed husband, I had specially invited a royal chef to the residence to teach me for a period of time. However, Xie Yarou disliked my behavior as uncouth and my hands as not delicate. He criticizes me, but he has never criticized the food I cook. The gatekeeper led me into the Imperial College dining hall, where there were very few people. In the kitchen sat only an old, toothless cook, who was said to be the father of the Chancellor, a man with strong connections. There was also an old woman picking vegetables, and as she worked, she asked, "What are we eating today?" The old cook, propping his chin and snoring, smacked his lips and said, "Orange stewed chicken, bitter melon stuffed with bananas. Which one do you think is better? I don't think it's good." Old Lady Xiao saw me as if she had spotted a savior. "Oh my, this must be the new cook." She pushed me toward the stove with a beaming smile and shouted in her loud voice, "Old Wen, you take a break today. Let the young lady show us what she can do." The old chef had no objections. His eyes, filled with the weight of years, grew slightly dazed upon seeing my face, as if he were glimpsing the shadows of old acquaintances through me. "All right, I'll keep an eye on things for you." I rolled up my sleeves and began cooking with swift, practiced movements. Soon, a rich aroma wafted out. The students swarmed over, their faces full of astonishment. He Yuqing was among them, his expression one of shock as he stared at me in a daze. I pressed my index finger to my lips and scooped him a generous portion of the dish. "Sure, this is to buy your silence." "Thank you." He Yuqing was very tall, and he leaned in close to me, speaking cautiously. The third person behind me, the female student wearing the purple school uniform, is the one you're looking for. A female student. Only then did I notice that amidst the vast expanse of blue, there was a small, conspicuous patch of purple. They tied their dark hair up high, holding books and reciting, full of vibrant life. Completely different from the women I had seen in the inner chambers. The old woman Xiao beside me noticed my gaze and kindly explained, "Thanks to the enlightened Empress Tianxing, exceptionally talented young women are also permitted to study and take the imperial examinations to enter officialdom. Although they won't be appointed to important government positions, it's still a path forward." I was quite astonished. Having lived 2 lifetimes, I had never heard of such a thing. He Yuqing didn't lie to me. That classmate Wen truly has an extraordinary demeanor. Her features are as exquisite as a painting, and her aura is cool and aloof. Even the eldest Miss Xie, who could become a princess consort with her beauty, doesn't compare to her by a third. Similarly, it also means she is not easy to approach. She walked up to the window, pursed her lips, and asked softly, "Madam, could you give me an extra scoop of rice?" Thus, with my excellent cooking skills, I successfully won over the stomachs of many students and built connections through it. Hung refers to a beautiful piece of jade in front of acquaintances. One Hung is actually a talkative girl, chattering endlessly about astronomy and philosophy, creating a striking contrast. Ningyu, it's fortunate you came. My grandfather has an eye condition and often mistakes sugar for salt. His cooking is not something just anyone can endure. Upon hearing that I was searching for my biological father, she regretfully informed me that in the Wen family's previous generation, only her father, Wen Jijiu, was a man. She was a child born in her parents' later years, and in fact, Wen Jijiu was already quite old, so his age didn't match up with my father's. But I felt a sense of closeness as soon as I saw you. The one in charge of business is my aunt. Could it be? I stopped her from letting her imagination run wild and retreated in disappointment. Fortunately, it wasn't a complete loss. I didn't find my father, but instead gained a close friend on the day of rest. I gathered a group of martial arts instructors and went to find Shen Jiwan with an imposing manner. Lady Xie's family background was not particularly high. The Shen family in Tongju was a scholarly farming family that had long since fallen into decline. Otherwise, they would not have sent Shen Jiwan to the Xie residence, hoping she could secure a good marriage. Shen Jiwan initially set her sights on her cousin Xie Yao, but as soon as the Xie family encountered trouble, she took what money she could and cut ties without hesitation. When I found her, she was being chased by a group of men in black, trembling as she hid inside a wine vat, her face pale with fear, perhaps not wanting to cause more trouble. The black-clad assassins chose to retreat decisively upon seeing our group enter. The girl in the vat had long, damp hair, reeked of alcohol, and her clothes were half-soaked and translucent. I handed her an outer garment with a look of disdain. Put this on first, then get up and talk. The night was cold, and Shen Jiwan didn't stand on ceremony with me either. She draped her outer garment over her shoulders, tilted her head back, and took deep, unrestrained breaths. I know why you're here, she said. Sister Jiang, you're looking for my cousin, aren't you? I didn't want to waste time playing guessing games. I drew my blade and pressed it against her delicate neck, my voice as cold as ice. Tell me, where is he? Under the moonlight. Shen Jiwan smiled knowingly. You'd never guess, would you? The once high and mighty noble son of a prestigious family is now wagging his tail, begging for the second princess's favor. My hands trembled in shock. Is it what I think it means? Xie Yao really went all out. The woman snorted coldly. He's already fallen so low as to become a male concubine, and he still expects me to be his mistress. I have standards too, you know. This is even worse than serving the second princess. I've heard that Her Highness has no qualms about anything. No wonder he managed to survive in such dire straits. It turns out he was selling himself. Does the third princess consort really not care about Xie Yao at all? In my memory, Xie Miao held this younger brother in high regard. You didn't know? Shen Jiwan paused briefly. His Majesty was extremely angered upon hearing of this matter and specifically ordered Xie Miao to annul her marriage with the third prince and enter a Taoist temple for quiet cultivation. Before she left, she arranged a meeting between the second princess and my cousin. In a daze, I seemed to see a butterfly perched atop the peach blossom tree in the courtyard. With a gentle flutter of its wings, it rendered the future unpredictable. In my memories of my previous life, Xie Miao, with the support of her family, ascended to the position of the nation's mother in great splendor. Now, she isn't even a princess consort anymore. Immediately after, I recalled another significant event. It was something I had overheard people mention with regret while attending a banquet. If only the Crown Prince Chen hadn't passed away unexpectedly back then, the court would surely be in a much better state, and we wouldn't have had to cede several cities. The current emperor has many children, yet he favors only the eldest son born to the late Empress Qianxing. Having long ago chosen him as the heir, however, he has lived too long for an emperor. Living too long is not always a blessing for the crown prince. On one hand, he had to face the suspicion of his aging father, and on the other, he had to suppress his younger brothers who had all grown up. On an ordinary night, the crown prince unexpectedly fell into a coma and passed away. 7 days later, the white-haired man had to bury his dark-haired son, and the emperor wept uncontrollably. In the end, it was the seemingly most unremarkable third prince who ended up benefiting. If you think about it carefully, the crown prince's incident seems to have happened around this time. We cannot let the third prince ascend to the throne, otherwise, Xie Yao, that brother-in-law of his, would use this opportunity to turn his fortunes around. But what else could I do in that instant? Countless thoughts flashed through my mind. In the end, I lowered the blade from Shen Jiwan's neck and asked one last question. The Xie family's treason, you had something to do with it, didn't you? Not only that, you were once the third prince's person. Shen Jiwan, who had been handling everything with ease, suddenly changed her expression. She pulled out the golden hairpin from her hair and lunged to stab. The martial arts masters guarding by my side immediately subdued her. I looked into her furious eyes and slowly smiled. Don't be so impulsive. I have no intention of exposing you, at least not for now. What do you want me to do? She asked, lowering her eyes. I said resolutely, kill Xie Yao. Winter came late, and the white sun passed in a flash. At some point, heavy snow began to fall like goose feathers in the sky. I had just dropped the wrapped wontons into the pot when I saw Granny Xiao rushing in hurriedly. Aining, she grabbed my hand and pushed me out. Stop. What you're doing now? There's a noble lady outside who's asking for you by name. This old woman can tell she's up to no good. You'd better go home and hide for now. The old cook didn't come today. My heart sank as I thought of a certain possibility. Just as expected, walking out, I saw a group of palace maids and eunuchs had already surrounded the exit. Ahead, on a magnificent and exquisitely decorated phoenix carriage, sat a woman with broad shoulders and a thick waist. She lifted the golden gauze curtain and asked mockingly, "Where are you off to, little lady?" After speaking, she discontentedly patted the young man kneeling beside her. Be gentler. It was the second princess, who had been widowed early and was known for her arrogant and domineering behavior. I faintly sensed a gaze filled with hatred piercing my back like a thorn. Lowering my eyes, I stepped forward to pay my respects. I wonder what important matter has brought your highness to seek me out. The surroundings fell silent for a moment. The second princess seemed to have witnessed something utterly terrifying, her teeth chattering as she demanded, "You, lift your head for me." I raised my eyes and met the gaze of the person wearing a mask, who was currently massaging the second princess's legs. Judging by the figure, it was indeed Xie Yao. For a moment, I didn't know whether to worry about myself or laugh at him first until the second princess shrieked in a shrill voice, "Guards, come quickly, scar her face for me, beat her to death and feed her to the dogs." I stood firm and said in a deep voice, "Your Highness, to have me killed without stating a reason is surely against the law, isn't it? Aren't you afraid of being impeached by the censors? What is there to discuss with you lowly commoners?" The woman sneered, the gold inlaid jade hairpin in her hair trembling slightly. "The law, I am the law." Xie Yao rubbed his leg and added, "This person has no sense of propriety. Your Highness is merely punishing her for disrespect. At most, she'll be fined a year or two of her salary." The second princess grew even more self-righteous upon hearing this. "You useless servants, what are you still standing there for?" The palace attendants, upon hearing the command, raised their wooden sticks and prepared to strike me. At the critical moment, a cold shout came from afar, "Stop!" Aunt Xiao, who had gone to deliver the message, followed behind Wen Heng, squeezed in among a crowd of furious scholars. Wen Heng, dressed in a purple robe with his dark hair tied high behind him, looked even more stern and cold with his delicate features. She said bluntly, "Second Prince, please leave. The Imperial College is a place of learning, and no one unrelated is allowed to cause trouble here." The second princess angrily kicked Xie Yao, causing the wine cups inside the carriage to clatter and shatter. "You, a mere junior of the Wen family, dare speak to this princess in such a manner. If Wen Jizhou were here, I might spare some face for the Wen family. But you, what are you?" Wen Heng didn't even lift his eyes. "My words are my father's will." He Yucheng shielded me, his jaw tight and his fury blazing. "Even the Son of Heaven is subject to the law as commoners are. We all hold scholarly honors. If the second princess insists on killing a defenseless woman, then I will stain the court with my blood and demand justice from His Majesty." "That's right, we will not stand by and do nothing." The other students chimed in one after another, their anger undimmed by the snow on their shoulders. The blue robes and purple gowns formed a striking scene of their own. They may have held different political views or belonged to different schools of thought, but they had all eaten the meals I prepared. Ice crystals clung to my eyelashes, and my eyes grew slightly moist, whether from the melting ice or a few stray tears, I couldn't tell. And Xie Yao, watching all this, was filled with indignation. "Your Highness, do not listen to the sophistry of these pedantic scholars." But the second princess hesitated. In that moment of her hesitation, two figures stepped through the gate of the Imperial College. One was a handsome middle-aged man, The other an old cook. Ahem, Your Highness, it's time to leave now that you've had your fun. The old chef placed his hands behind his back and let out a soft sigh. Uncle Wen, the second princess said, her expression shifting. She shot me an unwilling glance but had no choice but to leave with her attendants. Very well, I shall consider today's matter as a favor to you, uncle. And so, the fact that the old chef was the father of the Imperial Academy Chancellor was completely confirmed. I cupped my hands and bowed, expressing my gratitude to the crowd. Thank you all for your help today. All right, everyone, go back and review your books now. Chief Examiner Wen was a kind and gentle man. He waved to the students without uttering a single word of blame. Yuan Cheng looked at me with concern and did not move when Heng is also as the crowd dispersed. She asked in a low voice, Father, has the Crown Prince awakened? Chief Examiner Wen did not speak, only shaking his head with a somber expression. A cool breeze brushed by, bringing with it a chill at that moment. A faint, intimately familiar floral fragrance drifted to the tip of my nose. My mind went blank for an instant. In a panic, I stepped forward, grabbed the sleeve of Wen Zhijiu, and took a deep sniff. Hey, Miss Jiang, what are you doing? Wen Zhijiu was utterly horrified as he drew closer. He suddenly froze. Why do I feel that Miss Jiang looks so familiar? A bit like. He pulled the old cook over. Dad, come take a look. The old cook lifted his eyelids, his beard bristling with anger. Unfilial son, your father is old and his eyesight is failing. I paid no attention to their words, my expression grave as I loosened my sleeve. Forgive me for asking, but has the Minister of Rites just come from the Eastern Palace? Yes, why do you ask? I thought for a moment and decided to tell the truth. I think I know why the Crown Prince has fallen unconscious. As soon as I finished speaking, I saw Yucheng's eyes light up as he stared at me, pulling up both sleeves and offering them. Lady Jiang, I have sleeves too. The 8th year of being married to Xie Yao, I fell ill and lay in bed, my body growing weaker with each passing day. Even the medicine that Zhua risked her life to fetch brought no relief at that time. I could only lean against the head of the bed, gazing through the latticed window at the butterfly orchid, as if catching a glimpse of the outside world. I thought I had simply pushed myself too hard and exhausted my body, or perhaps it was the blood deficiency left from the time I rolled on the nail bed that caused me to fall so gravely ill. It wasn't until I was on my deathbed that Xie Yao threw the letter of divorce in my face and generously cleared my doubts. You caused my separation from Wanwan, and even in death. Don't think of entering the Xie family tomb. Did you know, there is a strange poison in this world that can kill a person without them even realizing it? The seemingly harmless butterfly orchid releases a fragrance that, when combined with the burning of a candle, turns into a deadly poison. The scent of a single butterfly orchid is not toxic, neither is the candle, but when the two are combined, they can silently take a person's life. I pulled myself out of my memories and told them everything about the butterfly orchid. Everyone looked horrified, their expressions gradually turning grave. His Highness the Crown Prince has always had a fondness for flowers and plants. Not long ago, at his birthday banquet, Prince Liang gifted him a rare treasure. Prince Liang is the third prince, who shares the same mother as the second princess. When Zhijiu said without hesitation, this is a matter of great importance, and we dare not be certain, but it appears to be the butterfly orchid. If it truly is, the palace is likely to be plunged into a storm of bloodshed. When Heng turned to look at me, Father, I have an idea. Why not let Yu disguise herself as a female physician and accompany you into the Eastern Palace to investigate? I nodded in agreement. As long as the Crown Prince survives. Does Xie Yao still dream of becoming the imperial uncle? Dream on. The Crown Prince has been unconscious for nearly 5 days. Without delay, I entrusted the task of making wontons to someone else and boarded the carriage with Chief Sacrificer. When the old cook was overjoyed and tossed a few pieces of tangerine peel into the soup. After so many days without cooking, my old skills have grown rusty. He slapped the spatula at his waist with a loud clatter. I am speechless. Let's take a moment to mourn for the students of the Imperial College today. In the carriage, when Heng secretly slipped a piece of chestnut cake into my hand, winking and saying, "Have this to tide you over, thanks. No need to be polite." if you can save the crown prince, our whole family will be grateful to you. Looking at my completely bewildered expression, the girl cleared her throat lightly and said, "The crown prince is my maternal uncle. You must have heard of Empress Qianxing, right? She's our Wen family's grandaunt. So, you get it." I was speechless. Good grief, this is no small matter. No wonder the second princess backed down in the evening. The sky was heavy with twilight, forming a stark contrast with the red walls and green tiles below. The closer they got to the Eastern Palace, the more imperial guards were patrolling, with strict security measures everywhere. Chief Sacrificer when presented his credentials and was only allowed to pass after they were thoroughly checked. Within the palace, the lamplight cast overlapping shadows, and a few clusters of plum blossoms stretched out their branches, as if reflecting the thoughts in people's hearts. The crown prince was settled. In his bedchamber outside, layers of heavily armed guards stood watch, and beneath the eaves, colorful flowers and plants grew in abundance, though in the heart of winter, they were partially blanketed by frost and snow. Drawing closer, one could even hear the chirping of insects inside the hall. A bitter scent of medicine lingered, refusing to dissipate. An elegant and dignified lady was closing her eyes, praying to the gods and Buddhas for her husband's safety. "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Princess," from behind the screen. I followed Minister Wen forward to pay my respects. "Please rise, it's so late. Cousin, what urgent matter brings you here?" The Crown Princess opened her eyes and asked. The flickering candlelight illuminated the dark circles and exhaustion beneath her eyes. "Could Your Highness first dismiss the attendants?" The Crown Princess gave an almost imperceptible nod to the female official beside her. The palace servants retreated like a receding tide, leaving only the most loyal confidants. Due to the distinction between men and women, when Heng conveyed the message on their behalf, explaining their purpose to the Crown Princess, as it concerned the seriously ill Crown Prince, Her Highness's gaze immediately turned sharp. She looked at me, scrutinizing me carefully for a while. "Very well. I grant you the authority to search this entire palace." I breathed a sigh of relief. I had already observed it when I first entered. The fragrance of the butterfly orchid doesn't spread far. To accurately target the Crown Prince, the plant wouldn't be placed too far away. However, after searching the bedchamber with the servants, I still couldn't find any trace of the butterfly orchid. Could it be that I guessed wrong? But then how do we explain the scent on Chief Sacrificer when, just as the Crown Princess began to show a hint of impatience, I gritted my teeth, strode toward the bed where the Crown Prince lay, and pulled aside the silk curtain. "What are you doing?" A rich fragrance of butterfly orchids washed over me before anyone could react. I pointed to the sachet hanging from the bed canopy and said clearly, "Your Highness, I have found it." When Heng exchanged a glance with me, then took down the sachet, sure enough, inside were pale purple moth orchid petals. I quickly blew out the surrounding candles. Having been given a second chance at life, I couldn't afford to be poisoned again. "Someone, come." The Crown Princess tightened her grip on the embroidered handkerchief in her hand. Abruptly rising to her feet, her eyes unable to conceal her fury, "Go, report this matter to His Majesty, and summon the imperial physicians for treatment." Even though it was winter, my back was already drenched in cold sweat, leaving me with nothing but relief for having made the right choice. Even the esteemed Master Wen was sweating for me. "You little lady are truly bold. Aren't you afraid of being taken down as an assassin right away?" I smiled bitterly and said, "It was a last resort." The thought of Xie Yarrow becoming the imperial uncle made me feel sick all over. The lanterns under the corridor stayed lit all night. The imperial physicians were no mediocre talents. They had been unable to proceed earlier simply because the cause of the illness was unclear. Once they had a clue, they brewed several doses of dark, bitter medicine that very night and poured them into the Crown Prince's mouth. They pricked his acupuncture points and even performed bloodletting. The morning light began to break until the hour of the rabbit. The Crown Prince on the sickbed slowly regained consciousness. Curious, I leaned forward to take a look, when suddenly I heard a cry, "Mother!" The newly awakened Crown Prince suddenly stumbled out of bed, pushed through the crowd, threw himself at me, and clung to my leg, like a child. He cried with tears and snot streaming down his face, "You've finally come to see me. I miss you so much." my child, me shocked, everyone shocked just when I thought the crown prince might have lost his mind. A sorrowful cry also came from the main gate. Are you? It was the old emperor, who had come to visit the crown prince. The old emperor, with hair and beard both white, had eyes like a hawk's that now brimmed with tears. Supported by a eunuch, he slowly made his way closer. My heart trembled, yet strangely, I felt no fear, and a sense of closeness welled up within me. I remember now, chief scholar when suddenly slapped his own head. It's my aunt, Miss Jiang looks very much like the portrait of my aunt. It's not her. The old emperor, however, shook his head and let out a long, sorrowful sigh. Young, you would never have such gentle eyes. She has long given up on me. How could she possibly come back? The crown prince finally came to his senses. So, I'm not in the underworld after all. I awkwardly took 2 steps back. Perhaps you should get up first. He slowly lowered his head to look at his knees, speechless. Silence was the crown prince tonight. The incident of the third prince bribing a palace attendant in an attempt to harm the crown prince quickly spread throughout the palace. Perhaps he was confident that such a secret matter would go unnoticed. The eunuch's room still stored many dried flowers made from butterfly orchids, and he was just writing a note to claim credit from his master. This rare treasure was purchased by the third prince's consort, who was far away in the Taoist temple, from a Western merchant. After uncovering the whole story, the emperor was greatly enraged. He immediately demoted the third prince to commoner status and sent a cup of poisoned wine to the Taoist temple. The second princess attempted to plead for mercy but was also fiercely scolded by the furious old emperor, who pointed at her face and shouted, "Don't think I don't know about those foolish things you've done before. I may be old, but I am not senile." With that, he revoked her fiefdom. The weeping second princess shot me a fierce glare before she left. I lowered my eyes, pretending it had nothing to do with me. Ningyu. The old emperor quickly changed his expression, pointing to the recently reclaimed fief, and asked kindly, "How about grandfather bestows this prosperous land of Jiangnan upon you again?" I reminded him with a helpless expression, "The secret envoy you sent to Yunju to conduct a thorough investigation hasn't returned yet. What if I'm not the crown prince's daughter? That would be crossing a line." The old emperor remained silent, simply unrolling a scroll for me to see. The paper had yellowed with age, but the portrait of the woman was strikingly lifelike, bearing an 80 to 90% resemblance to me. The most notable difference was the absence of a red mole between my eyebrows. "This is Empress Qiansheng," he said, his fingers trembling as they traced the painting, his voice filled with longing. "She was also my most beloved wife, and your face is the best proof of the crown prince's lineage." I waited in the palace for 2 days. The carrier pigeon's message from the secret envoy finally reached the old emperor and the crown prince. "So, you are Tsilian's daughter." The crown prince stared at the 2 drops of blood merging in the bowl, his expression complicated. I bowed and, word by word, voiced my mother's dying obsession. "Your Highness, this commoner wishes to ask on behalf of my mother, why did you never return, and why did you suddenly cut off all communication? I have let you and your mother down." "Father," the crown prince said that years ago, when he was observing the lives of the people in Yunju, he met and fell in love with mother. However, mother was the only daughter in her family and wanted a son-in-law to marry into their household, and she refused to follow him to the capital. He, too, could not abandon everything to settle down permanently in Yunju. Later, when the crown prince's father's identity was exposed, corrupt officials who had taken bribes risked their lives to hunt him down. He fell into a river, hit his head, and lost all memory of his time in Yunju. It took half a year of treatment for him to recover. By the time he sent people to search for mother, she was already nowhere to be found because, just like him, mother had been using a false name. I am speechless. Where is the sincerity between people? The old emperor was quite pleased. "Excellent, excellent. I always said Ningyu is of royal blood." The Empress of Qiansheng held different significance for both father and son, and I, with my face so resembling the late Empress Dowager's, along with the emperor's guilt, received a generous and substantial reward. Upon learning of this, the crown princess was not angry and even suggested that I could be recognized under her name. I refused. "A father can be replaced, But not a mother. The crown princess wasn't angry either. She even smiled and invited me to visit the Eastern Palace often to play with my sisters. I returned to the previous courtyard in a daze and saw Zhua, who also looked bewildered. She threw herself at me, grabbed my sleeve, and wailed, "Miss, you've become a princess. Pearl thought you didn't want me anymore." Woo-woo, silly Pearl. I patted her head reassuringly, just like I used to. Whether I'm a princess or not, nothing will change between us. Unless one day you find someone you love, then I'll give you a generous dowry. After all, with the rewards from my imperial grandfather and my father the crown prince, my money vault is growing larger and larger. I can't spend it all. I really can't spend it all. That night, I had a dream. I dreamed that after I died in my previous life, Xie Yarou quickly married a new wife. However, his triumph was short-lived, as someone uncovered the secret decree of the Grand Emperor and had him executed by hanging. An official from Tongju, who had traveled a long distance, came to collect my remains and gave me a proper burial. It turned out that in my previous life, my imperial grandfather had also recognized my true identity, which was why he had pardoned the Xie family. However, at that time, my father, the crown prince, had already passed away from illness. Fearing that exposing my true identity would bring disaster, he dared not reward me openly. Instead, he showed favor to Xie Yarou indirectly, so that I could benefit from it. No wonder Xie Yarou's rebirth was only a step slower than mine. It turns out he didn't live much longer either. To highlight my status, the Emperor grandfather specifically ordered a banquet to be held. The veteran ministers present were all visibly shocked when they saw me. The second princess sat below drinking, occasionally scolding and striking her male favorites from behind the screen. As I walked over, I happened to see Xie Yarou wiping her shoes with a look of enduring humiliation. "Aunt, you seem to be in high spirits. What are you doing here?" The second princess glared at me with a gloomy expression, slamming her wine glass down heavily. "Jiang Ningyue, you're actually here, completely unaware." Xie Yarou raised his head, gritting his teeth as he looked at my figure and said, "Someone of your lowly status dares to sneak into the palace banquet. Second Highness, quickly have someone beat her to death." Before I could even speak, the second princess gave him a hard slap across the face. "Shut up. People who don't know better would think you're still the lofty young Master Xie," I sneered, pouring an entire pot of wine over his head. How dare a lowly male concubine speak to this princess in such a manner? Xie Yarou's pupils contracted sharply as he stood up, only then noticing the magnificent palace gown and jade crown I wore, the attire of the banquet's guest of honor. How could this be? How is this possible? He was utterly shocked and couldn't believe the truth. To Xie Yarou, nothing was more devastating than destroying someone's spirit after killing them. He was still enduring humiliation as a kept man for the second princess, waiting for the day he could turn his life around. Yet after I left the Xie family, I thrived and even became a member of the imperial nobility. I stopped looking at him and instead addressed the second princess, who had an unpleasant expression on her face. "Aunt, your niece wishes to ask you for a male favorite." Without a second thought, she was about to refuse. "Don't even think about it. Then I'll have no choice but to tell the emperor about how you tried to have me killed at the Imperial College. I wonder, do you still have a fief left to be penalized?" Second princess speechless, her plump face squinted her eyes, and she fiercely flicked her sleeve as she delivered a harsh remark. "You think you can have just one? Am I the kind of petty person? Dear niece, I'm giving you both of these male attendants." Desperate Xie Yarou speechless. Given his character, it was natural that he wouldn't just sit back and wait for death. I had people secretly keeping watch. Sure enough, while the second princess was changing her clothes, Xie Yarou stabbed her with a knife and then secretly crawled out of the palace through a dog hole. The hidden guard asked me if we should intervene. I shook my head. Letting him die so easily, how could that ever quell the hatred in my heart? In the dead of night, Xie Yarou ran all the way but had nowhere to go, so he had no choice but to seek out Shen Jiwan. Shen Jiwan, following my orders, had been waiting for him for a long time. "Wanwan, come away with me." He looked utterly disheveled, clutching the woman's wrist urgently as he said, "I wish to marry you, to have only one love in this lifetime." Shen Jiwan pried his fingers off one by one. Then, catching him off guard, plunged the dagger hidden in her sleeve into his heart. "I'm sorry, cousin. But I am a spy sent by the enemy nation, having brought harm to your entire family. How could I dare marry you? Sister Jiang said that only if you die can I live, so, please go on. Your way first." The lanterns under the eaves swayed in the wind. Xie Yarou stared at her in disbelief, his broken words mingling with bloody foam, staining the snow on the ground. So, it turns out I was wrong after all. Yuniang, at that moment. It seemed he remembered in the heavy snowfall of his previous life, I had died just as miserably outside the door. I watched everything. My heart filled only with the calm that comes after vengeance is served. I cannot be magnanimous, nor can I let things rest peacefully. Those who betray me, those who deceive me, they deserve to burn in the deepest hell. Postscript. During my imperial grandfather's lifetime, I was the most favored princess. After my father, the crown prince, ascended the throne, I became the most favored princess. Even some of the scholars from the Imperial Academy, after entering the court, secretly attempted to support me in becoming a female emperor, but I had long since given up. What a joke. I was just reborn, not given a new brain. The former crown princess, now the empress, had 2 daughters, each more cunning than the last, their strategies unparalleled. Fighting them, I feared my hard-won second life would end too soon, so I might as well just give up. I'm laying my cards on the table. No matter who ascends the throne, won't they all have to call me imperial sister? As long as this face remains, I'll be the palace mascot. As for Shen Jiwan, I truly didn't kill her because I sent her to the Yi Ting to reunite with the women of the Xie family. I just wonder how Lady Xie will react upon seeing the niece who killed her own son. And I never remarried. Only Lord He, the governor of Tongju, often offered himself as a consort to serve as my paramour. In the 10th year of Yuanjing, I unexpectedly became pregnant and gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. He Yucheng rushed over in a panic, his official hat falling off in his haste. As soon as he entered the room, he grabbed my hand and asked with concern, "Ningyu, are you alright? Are you feeling unwell anywhere?" I smiled brightly and asked him with great enthusiasm, "Has Aheng become the Prime Minister yet?" The man nodded helplessly. "Why do you only ask about her and not about me? Do you even need to ask?" I squinted my eyes. "If you are willing, you could marry into the royal family." Outside the window, clusters of hydrangeas draped over the wall, the spring scenery at its finest. The red sun hung high in the sky, the golden crow descending westward just like my rebirth. Brilliant and vibrant. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.